Welcome, everybody. We're so excited to have y'all start joining in here. Let me make sure I have the chat enabled properly. I'm pretty sure y'all can use the chat. We'll try to use that tonight instead of the Q&A. I see some very familiar faces, very excited about that. Oh, Agnes, how delightful that Agnes is here. I just spent the weekend with my dear Agnes. We have some of our students. I see Amy and Anthony, Barbara. Wonderful to see all. Cecilia's here. How exciting. John Osmond, wonderful. The challenge with Zoom webinar is we just can't see your faces. So that's why I'm going through and looking at your names, y'all. I think it's just delightful to see you all here. We've got Perlita, Paula's on, Michelle, so many of y'all. Sister Jane from a completely different time zone. So glad you're here with us. It's such a delight to have y'all. We'll give it just one more minute for folks to kind of come on. And we'll open up tonight with a welcome from Dr. Ryan. We have I'm so excited for this evening. It's just wonderful. Hi, Crystal, good to see you. So if y'all are going to use the chat, I think you have the option to click host and panelists or click everyone. So if you just kind of check out that little feature, you've got a little drop down arrow there. You can message individual people, I think, on your end. But if you want everyone to see what you write, make sure you click everyone. I think the default is host and panelists. And so it's up to you how you want to use that. Just make sure you're kind of, I think I'll be able to see everything, but if you want other folks to see it, we'll use that for our Q&A tonight. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. It's a few minutes after. We have a wonderful session this evening, and I'm very, very excited to introduce folks, but we're going to start tonight with a welcome. We had Dr. Perry was going to welcome y'all tonight, and he had to step away at the last minute, and so he wanted to send his regrets. He was looking so forward to welcoming everyone this evening. And so we have Dr. Ryan is offering a welcome from a pre-recorded video because he had to step away tonight as well. And so I'm going to share this with y'all.
Good evening. My name is Tom Ryan. I'm Interim Vice President for Mission and Identity at Loyola University, New Orleans. I'm also Professor of Theology and Ministry in the Loyola Institute for Ministry and Associate Dean of the College of Nursing and Health. Dr. Kedrick Perry, Vice President for Equity and Inclusion here at Loyola, was going to welcome you all, but at the last moment was unable to. So Dr. Tracy Lamont asked me to welcome you all. I'm glad to be here. Gratitude is a fundamental theme of Ignatian spirituality, the spirituality that underlies our Loyola as a Jesuit and Catholic university. So I want to start off with a few words of gratitude. First off, I want to thank Kristin and Grant for sharing your wisdom this evening. Thank you so much for doing that. I also want to thank all of you all for joining us this evening, for taking time to reflect on synodality and its implications for the church and the life of faith today. Finally, thank you, Dr. Tracy Lamont and the whole Loyola Institute for Ministry team for putting this important series together that reflects on this term synodality and the importance of collaboration and co-responsibility among all the baptized, the lay, clergy, and religious. This word synodality may seem like a new word and a difficult word, but it's actually a very old word that contributes to the ongoing renewal of the church as we strive to be a sacrament, a sign of God's love and mercy in a world in such need of these things. So again, thank you, Kristin and Grant. Thank you to the audience who are joining us. And thank you to the Loyola Institute for Ministry for putting together this important series. Good evening.
So I'm so excited, y'all. I am Dr. Tracy Lamont. I am the Interim Director of the Loyola Institute for Ministry and Assistant Professor of Religious Education and Young Adult Ministry at the Loyola Institute for Ministry. That's a lot of words that involve ministry, things that I love. And so I am delighted to introduce our two phenomenal speakers. We have a speaker this evening and a panel responder. So first, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kristin Colberg. She is Associate Professor of Theology at the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University and School of Theology. She received her doctorate in systematic theology from the University of Notre Dame. Much of her research and writing focuses on Vatican I, Vatican II, and the relationship between the two councils. Kristin has been appointed by the Vatican as a member of the Anglican Roman Catholic International Commission, ARCIC, and has served there since 2018. More recently, she was appointed by the Vatican as the only theologian from the United States on the Theological Commission, serving on the Synod on Synodality. She was also one of only 3 representatives from North America to serve as a writer on the Synod's document for the continental stage, which sought to summarize all of the reports from the year of listening sessions on the diocesan level. Kristin resides with her husband, Sean, and 2 daughters, Mary and Catherine, in St. Joseph, Minnesota. Welcome, Kristin.
All right. Welcome from St. Joseph, Minnesota. It's really fun on Thursday night to be here. A huge thanks to Tracy and to Grant, and I appreciated the nice, warm welcome from Tom Ryan. So I am going to speak.
I'll go ahead and I'll introduce Grant first, and then we'll get going. Sorry about that.
I thought he was getting introduced. Go ahead.
Oh, that's fine. We'll do them both now, and then we'll seamlessly move into the next move. And so our alumni, LIM alum responder, Grant Tregre, is with us tonight. Tregre is with us. He leads the social justice ministry at St. Joseph the Worker Catholic Church in New Orleans metro area. Informed by Catholic social teachings, this ministry addresses the systemic and social sins of racism, poverty, mass incarceration, and a host of other social concerns. Grant also serves on the Archdiocese of New Orleans Committee for Racial Equity and Justice and is the chairperson on the Sisters of the Holy Family Lafon Nursing Facility Advisory Board. Grant is the vice chairperson of his parish's pastoral council and remains actively engaged in various religious communities, grassroots organizations, and so forth, and more. Grant holds a Master of Pastoral Studies from the Loyola Institute for Ministry and is currently pursuing a Doctor of Ministry in the Oblate School of Theology. Woohoo! Grant also holds a B.S. in Physics, a B.S. in Electrical Engineering, and an M.S. in Systems Engineering. Grant loves school. Grant currently serves as Associate Director of Safety and Mission Assurance at NASA, Stennis Space Center, and maintains a 20-plus year career in the aerospace industry. Grant, you have a phenomenal background. So welcome, and thank you for being our alumni panel responder tonight.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you to you, Dr. Colberg. Can't wait to hear your lecture.
And thank you all to our attendees. And I'll just tell you our format tonight. Dr. Colberg is going to begin this evening with her lecture, and then we will move into Grant's reply to their lecture, and then we will have time for Q&A. So I want you all to be thinking of, how this is kind of coming to life in your minds. And you can use the chat. You can feel free to use it as we're going. I'm going to facilitate the Q&A in the end. And so you can just kind of drop your questions in the chat there. So thank you, Dr. Colberg. Without further ado, take it away.
Good evening. Sorry I jumped in, but I am thrilled to be here with you from St. Joe, Minnesota. I would say the word lecture for what I'm going to do might be an overly formal description, but I'm so pleased to be here and so excited to have been working with Tracy and Grant. And it's such a fun group already. I love all the greetings over the chat. So I'm really thrilled that all of you are interested in synodality and would spend an hour with us this Thursday night. So I'm going to take about 20 minutes and talk about my experience of the synod. And again, I'm really captivated by this idea about creating a culture, a change in the culture of the church, and thinking about how synodality is a means for that. So I'm going to share my screen. I like to use images whenever possible. So changing church culture, I think just a hugely important topic. So here we go, 20 to 20-ish minutes on how the synod might affect such a change. Yeah. Okay, so Tom Ryan stole a little bit of my thunder here when he alluded to the fact that synodality is a really ancient reality in the church, perhaps the oldest form of governance in the church, where these bishops would come together and they would pray together and they would listen to each other and they would walk together and they would try to make decisions about the health and the future of the church. So when we think about synodality and why Pope Francis would choose that word for it, in part it's because he's tapping into these deep roots of renewal and reform and listening that go all the way back in the church's history. Now, this is a picture, a more modern picture of one of the sessions coming out from Vatican II. Now, what's interesting is that when we think about these synods in the ancient context, most times synods were called because there was a problem, okay? Something was going on in the church that was threatening and perhaps could fragment the community. So when these bishops are coming together to think and to discern, a lot of times I like to tell my students what they're doing is they're trying to stop a conversation. They're trying to end a practice that might be inappropriate or leading to fragmentation, or a teaching that as they discern the nature of the faith, they determine is not accurate or reflective of the gospel. But when we get to Vatican II is a new type of council. And I want to spend a minute talking about it, because every conversation that I've been in as part of the Theological Commission for the Synod with others and with Pope Francis has seen Vatican II as an absolute foundation, lens, and model for the synodality that Pope Francis is bringing the church to today. So Vatican II, just for a minute, even though I could talk about it for a long time, Vatican II was a different kind of council. It wasn't called in this kind of defensive mode of trying to stop a conversation. Vatican II was trying to start a conversation. It was trying to be a dialogue between the church and the world about how the church could renew itself and how the church could lend its wisdom to promoting human flourishing. So what I like to say, drawing on John O'Malley, is that previous councils were largely about governing observable behavior. Previous councils like to make rules. Vatican II is not a council about rules or doctrine. Vatican II is about faith, developing the faith of individuals and the faith of the community, and the conversion of the church to a more authentic version of itself. So now I'm going to show you my favorite picture of Vatican II. This is a group of bishops leaving one of the meetings. And I like this picture because it shows us one of the things about Vatican II that was so important and that Pope Francis is really inspired by, which is that Vatican II was a meeting of the world church that involved closeness. It involved being together. It involved listening to one another. So if you read the diaries of the participants at Vatican II, they say that so much of the work of the council got done eating meals and praying together and walking back and forth to the sessions, and like taking the bus between the different guest houses where you'd sit next to somebody who was at the meeting about Revelation, but you had been in the meeting about liturgy, and you exchanged ideas about, the themes that were important. So at the end of the Second Vatican Council, Paul VI kind of noticed the importance of this experience of closeness of the world church. And he instituted the regular practice of the Synod of Bishops, okay? Now, the reason why this is important is because when Pope Francis in 2015 announces his intention to make synodality a focus of his papacy, and he has the famous line that synodality is what God expects of the church in the third millennium, he does that on the anniversary of Paul VI instituting the synod towards the end of Vatican II. So it's very clear that Pope Francis is trying to link his vision with this closeness of the experience of the closeness of Vatican II and this history of synodality. So here we have Pope Francis at his election, a wonderful image that many of us will remember. And another great image from Pope Francis riding the bus back with his brother bishops after he was elected. and paying the hotel bill, wanting to make sure that he was taking care of the accounts that were owed. So this is a favorite picture of mine. So when Pope Francis became the Pope, and when Pope Francis looks at the world, I had a very formative conversation with the documentary filmmaker, Sebastian Gomes, who is a Johnny, who's now the head of, I think, visual media at America, and made two beautiful documentaries about Pope Francis. But Sebastian Gomes said to me that, after interviewing Pope Francis and getting to know him well, that when Pope Francis looks at the world, he doesn't put on like Catholic goggles and like, look, where are the Catholic problems in the world? I want to solve like a Catholic problem. Like when Pope Francis looks at the world, he sees the same human problems that all of us see. He sees the war in Ukraine. He sees problems of migration. He sees racial injustice. He sees the problems that inhibit human flourishing. And he tries to think about what resources the Catholic Church has to offer. And why that's really important is because if we look at the world today, we see, what the business world would call, systems analysis would call VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And what even church history shows us is that when the world seems threatening and divisive, oftentimes the church reacts in this defensive mode of like drawing clear lines and trying to have precise answers. And when we look around us today, we see national leaders responding with us versus them mentalities and clear lines. But what I want to just express to you today is that Pope Francis looks at the world at the beginning of his papacy, and he thinks, how can I respond to the needs and the uncertainty about the future? And he responds not with like clear lines, but with listening. He's asking the whole church to listen to how the Holy Spirit is speaking to the church, to listen to each other. No topics off the table, no choice. Here's the 5 things you could talk about. I mean, it's radical openness to listening, which again, if the topic of tonight is thinking about creating a change and the change of culture in the church, I mean, synodality is this radical change, but not necessarily a change for newness, but a change to go back to our roots and who we are most fundamentally. So again, we have Pope Francis announcing that he wants synodality to be the project of his papacy. It's what God expects of the church of the 3rd millennium. This, for those of you who would like to geek out about theology as I do, is a picture of Karl Rahner. And Karl Rahner has a very famous article called Chalcedon End or Beginning, which some of us may know and others of us won't. But the point of this article is that councils are always simultaneously an end and a beginning. An end because they bring clarity and closure to certain questions, but in the process of doing that, they also raise new questions and new directions. So here's Pope Francis. Pope Francis was shaped by Vatican II. He's the first pope since Vatican II that was not a shaper of the council, but he was shaped by it. So Pope Francis is ordained in 1969, 4 years after the conclusion of the council. And so Pope Francis grows up and is formed in his life and his priestly ministry with the theology and style of Vatican II. So this is just a quick slide about. So when I make the argument to you that Vatican II is the foundation for synodality, it's because Pope Francis, he wants synodality to reflect similar to the goals of Vatican II. Why was it called? It wasn't called to govern observable behavior or create doctrine. It was called as a renewal and about conversion. the style of Vatican II. It wasn't about juridical language and precision. It was about closeness. It was about listening. It was about being together. And also, Vatican II is a foundation because the content is incredibly important. This idea of the mystery of God, the mystery of the church, the people of God, the sensus fidelium, the co-responsibility of the baptized. Another member of the Theological Commission with me is Orm Rush. And Orm Rush tells us that perhaps the most significant achievement of Vatican II is that Vatican II gives us an ecclesiology, not of hierarchy, not a vision of the church rooted in authority or hierarchy, but Vatican II gives us a baptismal ecclesiology. It gives us this notion of the people of God and the dignity and the co-responsibility of the baptized as the horizon against which our views of authority and structure are articulated, okay? So when Pope Francis communicated to the Theological Commission what he was hoping we would help him with, one of the first things he said was, I want you to probe the ecclesiology of the people of God, okay? So Pope Francis, in my understanding of how he views synodality, he's saying that Vatican II was an end and a beginning. It gives us this beautiful theology of the people of God. It gives us a baptismal ecclesiology, but the theology of Vatican II has not yet fully transformed the church, all of the church's structures and the ways it communicates and its means of understanding mission. So what Pope Francis wants to do, in my argument, is in some ways, synodality is a next stage of reception of the theology of Vatican II. It is the beginning part of Vatican II. It is the enacting of Vatican II. And so the first quote on my slide is from Pope Francis. He said, I want you to probe the ecclesiology of Vatican II. The second quote is Kristin Colberg, saying that in some ways, synodality, Vatican II was more about how we are church than what is the church. And synodality is about this how. How are we church? I think about synodality all the time. And I was giving a talk about it last week. And I've been really thinking about the fact that I think for many years in the church, we decided that we had to focus on the what of the church. And we had to figure out the what. And that was more important than the how. And there was a linear order between those two. But I think one thing that we're really doing right now is figuring out the how of the church that might help us bring greater precision or bring into tune our what, some areas of our what of the church. And I think that's, again, to go back to the theme of tonight, that's a cultural change in the church, to focus on the how and let the how shape the what. Okay. So this is a picture from Pope Francis's Instagram page on the opening day of the Synod. And I am not a big Instagram person, but one of the monks at the monastery here at St. John sent me this picture. And he said, Kristin, you must not have gotten the memo because you're the only one in this picture not wearing black, because I am wearing a bright blue blazer. And right after that meeting, I took the blazer off here and I just have this a white shirt on here. Pope Francis mandated that everyone in Rome for the opening of the Synod, so all the commissions and the bishops and the cardinals, and he mandated that 30 people under the age of 30 had to participate. And all of these people had to go through these listening sessions, spiritual conversation, okay? So the Cardinal Tagle is in this is the English language group. Next to him is the Cardinal from Burma, Myanmar, and then the Cardinal from Montreal. And we went around this table. We spent 3 hours, and everyone had 3 minutes to respond to this question. What is the Holy Spirit calling the church to today? So if you're Cardinal Tagle or you're a 23-year-old young woman from India, you have 3 minutes. And then at 3 minutes, a bell rings, and it doesn't matter if you're in the middle of your sentence, pause, silence. Then the second round is always lifting up things that we heard in the first session, okay, in the first round. What was said that resonated with me? And then the third round is open discussion. So this was a really moving way, and I think it showed a lot of us that, like, the Synod is not about let's go get some work done, let's go produce some documents. That even these early official meetings of the Synod are about spiritual conversation and learning the practice of communal discernment and learning the skills of listening. I always include this picture because Cardinal Tagle asked if he could take a picture with all the young people, and I was included in that group, so I have to show that I am among the youth. So I want to go quickly through some of these, but then begins the massive project of that year of consultations on the diocesan stage, where all of our parishes and dioceses have to figure out, how do we do this listening? Like, how do we create trust? How do we, do the logistics of it? How do we teach people communal discernment? All of the dioceses in the United States were mandated. Now, the extent to which they participated is a different question, but mandated by Pope Francis to submit each diocese, as we all probably know, submits 10 pages. The whole US submits 10 pages. So the USCCB had to take all of those pages and bring them down into 10. That created 115 national reports from Episcopal bishops' conferences. Actually, only 112 of 115 were submitted. So there were 112 10-page national reports. Then, as we know, right now, we're in the continental stage, and the continental stage is divided into these 7 continents, not they're not all what we would read in our geography book. North America is only Canada and the United States. All right, so trying to move somewhat quickly here. After this process, the Vatican selected 3 people from each continent to spend 12 days in Frascati, Italy, reading those 112 reports and synthesizing them into the document that is now known as Enlarge the Space of Your Tent. Okay, so I was picked to be one of the 3 people from North America, spent 12 days with 3 people from every continent. I mean, what an amazing, I don't know how I got to be so blessed to pray and walk and eat and journey and accompany 3 people from every continent, as they said, like, here's what the people in my region want, and here's the needs that they see, and here's our joys, and here's our wounds. And we took it very seriously that we were trying to capture the voices of these people in that document. So people always say to me, okay, what was the most surprising thing, or what was shocking about reading those 112 reports? And for me, that's a very easy answer. The most shocking thing about those reports is how similar they are. How I could hear my voice in all of them. How the people of God in Zimbabwe, why they have unique experiences and unique questions, like, they want fundamentally the same things that I want and that I heard in the US and that I've heard in traveling throughout the world. So just really quickly, what are some of those things that everybody wants? Everybody wants better formation. That is, in my mind, the number one thing everyone said. We want better formation. The church is synodal and there's no going back. We can never not be a synodal church. It is who we are. We need a new style of leadership that has closeness, that overcomes clericalism, that the pastors smell like the sheep. We want greater participation. By participation, we mean we want lay people to be able to do more things, participate more, and we want greater inclusion. We want more people to feel welcomed to participate. We want better homilies and vibrant liturgies. We ache over the loss of youth. We want enculturation of the gospel. Especially many countries, especially countries in Africa, noted that liturgical materials are not accessible in their language. And so that provides a great chasm between people's ability to feel at home. And a lot of countries in Europe talked about secularization and how the church is alienating itself from society. So quickly, this is Cardinal Grecht, who's the head of the synod after Pope Francis. He's really the secretariat of the synod. And he said to us in Frascati, we are trying to be the eyes and the ears of the people of God. We don't want to theologize what they're saying, and we are not trying to problem solve and answer all the problems. We're trying to lift up in the Enlarge the Space of Your Tent document. This is what we heard you say. When the Catholic Church engaged in the largest ever consultation on a global level, what did the people of God say? So here's a picture from that Frascati. We sat for 12 days and tried to think about these themes and how to communicate them. I love this picture because we have a woman from Oceania, a woman from Europe, a woman from South America, a woman from Asia, a woman from Africa, two women from North America. I mean, a really global, honest, open listening session. And this is the cover of the document. So we took that to Pope Francis. He read drafts of it as we were writing it, and he was really aware of the content. And was insistent that the voices that all, if you read that Enlarge the Space of Your Tent document, there's no quotes from Vatican II, there's no quotes from Pope Francis, there's no quotes from the Magisterium. It's only quotes from the reports and the Bible. And it's really a new change in the culture of the church. Who's in authority in the church? The voices of the people of God. So now, just quickly, the U.S. has ended its continental phase. The U.S. was the only one of the 7 continents that all of its meetings were virtual. It had 10 listening sessions. I think 5 were in English, 3 were in Spanish, 2 were in French. And now they are setting out to write their document, which is the continental response to the Enlarge the Space of Your Tent, and it's due March 31st. People love the tent. Last thing I'll say, how are we changing the culture of the church? Pope Francis announced that the synod is going to start with an ecumenical prayer service in St. Peter's Square, and then it was announced that all the bishops that are participating will start with a 3-day retreat. I think those are like major ways that we're changing the culture of the church. By how we be church. Okay, I'm eager to hear Grant. I'm thankful that he was willing to give his time to offering a response. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Dr. Colberg, for that great delivery. Certainly is a privilege and an honor of mine to be a part of the program. So thank you, Dr. Tracy, also for letting me engage this way. As a LIM graduate, I'm always game for trying to help in any way I can and be a part of the different activities that Loyola brings to the table. Dr. Colberg, you brought so much to our minds today. Thank you for the many images that you provided that gave us a window into not just the Vatican II synod, if you will, but the current process that you are blessed to be such a part of and so engaged in. And thank you for giving us that inside scoop on how the process is working and all of the personal perspectives of the process that us folks outside of that realm may not get or may not see as much of. So thank you for that. I certainly found your presentation to be very hopeful and both thought-provoking. Of the many insights that you offered, a few salient points jumped out at me, and I'd like to address those few points of the many points that you gave us. Just want to be clear about that. I'd like to address 3 of those points, but I'd like to do so within the context of the main ministry focus area that I'm a part of. So over the past 10 years or so, I've served in some form of a leadership role in the area of social justice ministry. At my current parish, St. Joseph the Worker, we focused on creating awareness of systemic social sins, performing acts of solidarity with those most impacted, and engaging in critical action toward changing systems and rectifying social concerns. Certainly, our efforts are based in the gospel and rooted in Catholic social teachings. And to give a little bit of an example of some of the activities that we do within this realm of social justice ministry, this past year and a half or so, we engaged the Louisiana redistricting process in order to overcome the racially gerrymandered voting districts of Louisiana. I know several other states are dealing with the racism in their voting process in their districts, and Louisiana is not unique in that regard. So in this sense, we wrote letters, we attended legislative roadshows, we met with individual state reps and attended legislative sessions at the state capitol en masse with our social justice ministry in combination with other grassroots groups. Another main focus of ours is dealing with the issues of mass incarceration and its disproportionate and negative impacts on the Black and Brown community. We have done some things like facilitated open arms reentry clinics in partnership with the Justice and Accountability Center here in New Orleans, where we have helped formerly incarcerated people deal with some of the barriers they face years after they have served their time. We have offered expungement clinics and driver's license reinstatement clinics. And even in the area of environmental justice, we have recently joined an organization called Together New Orleans, which has a lighthouse project, which allows faith-based communities to obtain solar panels so that during normal hours, we can be more environmentally responsible and reduce our energy usage, while at the same time during power outages or major natural disasters or hurricanes like we have here in New Orleans quite often, our faith communities can serve as a lighthouse to our neighbors where we would have power and allow neighbors to come in. So these are just a few examples of how our social justice ministry both tangibly makes us a difference in people's lives and the lives of ourselves, as well as addresses systemic and social concerns, both at the legislative level and institutional levels. And so what I'd like to do today is to try to draw some parallels between what you have provided us and the very nature of this synodal process and what it is and how different it is, and some of the parallels between that and what we do in our social justice ministry. One of the key sentiments that I heard in your talk today focused on Pope Francis calling us to be more synodal, engaging the quote, people of God. I think you used the term, he wanted to probe the ecclesiology of the people of God. And this to me sounds very much like a grassroots approach to synod. The synod reaches out to the people of God and includes them, or I should say it includes all of us in this process. Essentially, it sounds like in that first phase, it started with us. And that's very encouraging because, there have been past synods where that hasn't quite happened. But this approach is applicable to our social justice ministry efforts because much of the work that we do in community focuses on grassroots community and relationship building, building partners with organizations that are certainly Catholic or Christian in nature, but also organizations that are not, but working toward common goals. As I mentioned, one of the organizations, Together New Orleans, is actually made up of over 65 faith communities of various different denominations coming together to make real change. And so it's encouraging to hear that same approach in the Synod of what Pope Francis is calling us for, that we also take in our efforts of social justice community grassroots building. The second point I wanted to address, which I guess I would say it flows throughout your entire lecture and delivery presentation today, is the listening aspect. Listening as a key aspect of being synodal. I think you use the term radical listening. I love that term. I'm going to steal it from you or from Pope Francis. Listening as a community as we journey together, listening as we build consensus. And in our efforts in doing social justice, we have to listen to the Holy Spirit and to one another in order to discern what activities we are going to engage in. We listen to the cries of our community. We listen to the hurts and the pains. We listen to those who are outcasted and most impacted. And I will say I've been a part of, and I'm sure you all have as well, been a part of some ministry and mission efforts where people come in thinking that they know everything to minister to people and yet forget to listen to them and understand what it is they want, what it is they need. And so it's so encouraging, again, to hear that in this synodal process, that listening is such a focus, and it reinforces the approach we take in social justice ministry as well, and that need to listen. The third and final point that I wanted to highlight was the discerning of what the Holy Spirit is calling us to. I think I may not be quoting you all the way right, but I think you said not so much the what of the church, but the how of the church. What is the Holy Spirit calling us to do? The how of the church. Those of us who study practical theology understand that practical theology certainly is an academic discipline, but it is more so something that you do. You do practical theology. And similarly to how Pope Francis calls not only for us to engage in synod, but to be synod, to be synodal. So for those of us engaged in ministry work, we are also engaged in synod and engaged in practical theology. Stephen Bevins, in his Models of Contextual Theology, foundational book in practical theology, characterizes several different models of practical theology. But two that he characterizes, the praxis model and the anthropological model, both take very seriously the experience of the person, of the culture, of the context in which you start. And these models certainly move on into a faith-based reflection and into a tradition and then into committed action. But in both of these models, they start with the where you are, the who you are, the what do you think and what do you understand. And it seems to be so refreshing that this synodal process is also doing the same thing. It is starting with the people. It is starting with the people of God and engaging them in terms of where they are from all different parts of the world. That's such a positive and a very refreshing aspect of what the Synod is and where it's going. And just briefly, I'd like to point out maybe three other small quotes that come from the document that you mentioned that you played such a major role in developing, the working document on the continental stage with the title Enlarge the Space of Your Tent. I perused that document. It's a pretty large document, as you mentioned, and you gave us the layout of how it was developed and from all of the many different reports that rolled up from all the different places. I think it's phenomenal in and of itself that you can amalgamate all that into one document. But I was looking with the lens of, what does it say about social justice? I was quite curious about it. And I was again encouraged to find a few places where social justice was called out. One place is in line 46, where it very clearly says that other reports called for the church to be confident in contributing to debate and action for justice in the public sphere. And that desire was for greater formation in the church's social teaching. So this comment, which is actually from a group that wasn't changed, it wasn't formed, it was more of a quote, says that people want more debate and action for justice in the public sphere. And as you mentioned, Dr. Colberg, more formation. There's another place where it was mentioned that a further theme common to many reports is the weakness of deep ecumenical engagement and the desire to learn how to breathe new life into the ecumenical journey, starting with concrete daily collaboration on common concerns for social and environmental justice. Again, it's very encouraging to see that it's not just one or two communities that are engaged heavily in social justice, that these themes are rolling up from all over the world or continent here. And the last quote that jumps out comes from the Union of Superiors General and the International Unions of Superior General, where they say the seeds of synodality, where we break new ground in solidarity. And they say it's a securing of future of racial and ethnic justice and peace for Black, Brown, Asian, and Native American brothers and sisters. Again, very encouraging to see that in such a document that rolls up themes and quotes and messages from individual communities, small congregations from all over the world, that these themes are moving forward and are going to be a part of the synodal process, but also that it's a part of what it means to be synod. So I'd like to say, Dr. Colberg, thank you again for your amazing lecture, for your amazing images that you gave us, for giving us the insight and, like I said, the inside scoop into what that process is like, and for just doing the work that you do. I know it's not easy. I know you have your challenges with such a large exercise, if you will. But we are very, very, very glad that you're able to share what you could with us. And I certainly look forward to hearing more in the future as the process moves on. Thank you very much.
Grant and Kristin, thank you both so very much. I was just taking copious notes over here, very excited. It's like being in a master class with the two of you. So I'm grateful, so grateful for all your wisdom and insight. I picked up, there's so much overlap between what you were both saying, and Grant, I so appreciate you using the method of practical theological reflection that we use with our students in LIM all the time to really raise up the importance of what Kristin's saying and and the importance of the synodality. One of the things that really struck me that you both said a little differently, and it might not be the same thing, but it hit me very similarly, is that, Dr. Colberg, you were saying, kind of the what of church, and then we need to do the how of church, and Grant, you had mentioned, ministry to versus ministry with. And I see those connections really, really strongly when the rubber hits the road with our pastoral ministry leaders. We've been doing ministry to for a long time. We're teaching people the what of church for a long time. And it's hard to break out of that, because that's very much kind of the way ministry's been thought of for a long time. And we're being called to do ministry with people, to walk with people. And that itself is practicing church. That's the how of church. And maybe that's the start of the how of church. So I thought that was a really beautiful connection the two of you made. And we have several questions already up and running, so I'm very happy to field those for you. And you're welcome to also address anything if we didn't get to something or what have you. I do have one in the Q&A. If it that came in. Just if you want to, if maybe Dr. Colberg, if you could define synodality, what would you, like one sentence, what would you say it is?
First of all, I want to start by saying that, Grant, I really learned a lot from your presentation, and I am sincere in telling you I will be thinking about it for a long time, and it really will shape some of my ways of thinking. So thank you. What is synodality? One sentence is a hard thing to say. I will. It's a complex thing because synod is a thing, a noun. A synod is like a meeting, okay? So synodality is trying to, so Pope Francis isn't interested in the noun version. He's more interested in like the adjective version, like synodal. So being together, listening, walking together, discerning. But it's even more than an adjective. I've been reading a book by Raphael Luciani, who's a very famous theologian from Venezuela. And he says that synodality isn't a noun, it's not an adjective, it's a principle. It's something that, it's the principle of how we walk together that is meant to shape the whole church. Now, I don't want to get too far into the weeds. I'm going to say one more sentence. The reason why some people struggle with the word synodality is because in the history of the church, synods were like bodies with decision-making power. They were deliberative bodies. But the synods that Paul VI institutes are consultative. They are calling the bishops together to inform the Pope about decision-making. So we do have sometimes debates about, is what we're really doing a synod? Like, why is Pope Francis using that word? Because historically the word synod meant something different. Pope Francis is like exploding the meaning of synodality to mean more than what the word has historically meant. But if I was giving you the smallest answer, it is synodality is this principle of being church that is based on a posture of listening and communal discernment. But it's not just talking about the processes, it's talking about transforming the whole church.
Thank you, Kristin. Thank you so much. We have a question from, I'm going to read Sister Jane's comment because I felt she wrote it so beautifully. She's one of our dear students in Kenya. She said, glad to hear the document with actual voices of the church is going ahead. I hope you will be in that conference still to midwife how these voices will be taken responsibly by the hierarchical leaders without editing those voices. I wanted to raise up her voice. Right.
Thank you, Sister Jane.
So John Osmond, he's a delightful faculty member of ours. So he says, Kristin, I am curious about the scope of charge we might anticipate due to the synod. While the process is significantly different, might we expect incremental change? This is in line with the adage that the church thinks in centuries. Like the whole, takes 100 years for a council to come into play, So however, given the situation today, some anticipate or are calling for more deeper reform. So I wonder how you'd respond.
I'm gonna say something. I'd love to hear Grant say something about the potential he sees for change. I think that some people would say, why hasn't? And I'm not saying John would say this, okay? Some people would say, why isn't Pope Francis just changed? Sometimes people get frustrated with Pope Francis because Pope Francis is more about gestures and than he is about I'm going to change this doctrine. But sometimes people are when's that doctrine going to change? We'd rather see that kind of a change. What I think is if Pope Francis wanted to make a lasting change in the Catholic Church, how could he do it better than by opening up and now having the weight of the people of God behind him to say, everyone wants inclusion. Everyone wants to be a more welcoming church. Everyone wants to be more accompanying and think about new roles for women, So I actually think that we could anticipate that the heft of the voices of the people of God could bring about significant change, and that Pope Francis trying to make the change come not like a zap from the center, but really, I think he's putting all his chips on the table to say, I've, listened to what the people of God have said, And he is trying to also empower Episcopal dioceses to act at the national level and more action at the local level, because he's causing the change from the center by mandating the synod, but I think he's hoping to see some of the changes come up from the local. But I'd be eager to hear what Grant has to say about, do you think, from what you read, that this could be an impetus for real change in the church?
Thank you, Dr. Colberg. Yeah, I certainly think that it could be. I think that after reading the working document, for sure, I was really surprised. I hate to say it, but I was surprised to see so many of the actual quotes and themes come in. And the themes that you gave us tonight, the roll-up themes of formation and greater participation, more vibrant liturgies. I will say, as a member of an African-American church in the South, full gospel African-American Catholic church in the South, and have been a part of several churches across the country when I lived in different places, we have often been asking for these kinds of changes. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is you just got to be the change yourself. Certainly some changes are going to have to come from the hierarchy of the church, and it's certainly to be respected and adhered to. But there's a lot of things that we can change ourselves, and we can push. And if you're running into some roadblocks, so be it. But we have the lay people have to stop waiting on the hierarchy of the church to change, and we have to start changing. And I think that's also a sentiment that you find in this synod, right? That grassroots approach of, hey, I'm listening to everybody in the church, So that'd be my thoughts on it.
Can I say one quick thing? This might be a good comment to wrap up a bunch of people's comments. When I would travel around the country during the diocesan phase, the single most common question that I would get asked would be, how do I know that the bishops aren't just going to they let us all talk, and then the bishops are just going to filter out any controversial comment that they don't like, so that what we're going to get in the end does not really represent the concerns and the desires that we really have. Now, if you take anything from my presentation tonight, it is, if you have not yet read the document, Enlarge the Space of Your Tent, go read it. The introduction, the first words are, the synod is on. The synod is on. And you know what that means? It means that these things that people said were not hidden away. They're documented, okay? This desire for inclusion, desire for women's leadership, desire for, social justice. Now the church is accountable for those things because it is in the document. There's no going back. So I think that there is great cause to be enormously hopeful. These things were buried. They're all there, and they're not theologized. They're not hidden behind the magisterium. It is quotes from around the world that are, if I am bold enough to tell you, if you read that document, has amazing authenticity. You hear the voices of people. It is not, glamorized or oversimplified. It is really authentic. So I think we're at an exciting point. Could there be roadblocks in the future? Sure. But I think we have a lot of cause to think the Holy Spirit is working in the church today.
I think that was really powerful, Dr. Colberg, because I was doing a lot of work with young adult ministry on the Synod on Young People that was before this Synod. And, the final document was written by young people that came to Rome in the similar process that you all did, and that it is quoted probably the most in the encyclical written by Pope Francis, Christus Vivit, which means that the voices of young people are a part of the tradition of the church. And so I feel really empowered that, by this whole process, is that the people's voices from around the world are documented as a part of the teaching tradition of the church now. And I think, and like you said, you can't just ignore that. I think there's something really powerful in the way Pope Francis has gone about this to show change. But I won't say anymore. We might have time for one more question. If that's okay, do you all think you want to stay on for one more? We're kind of at time. We'll try one more. Lisa Tetlow, we'll go to yours. I will add that our second lecture in the series is pulling out the role of women. So we won't go on too much about that. Join us on March 16th for that one, Lisa. But she writes full equity involves ordination in things like inclusive language and liturgy restoration of biblical passages about women in the lectionary, modification of portions of canon law. Sometimes I get the feeling that some bishops prefer this issue not to be included in synod documents. And maybe if you want to respond to her question there.
I think the role of women is really important and it's really represented well in the document. I think it is one of those, again, I skipped over this slide, but I had the 5 most frequently asked questions I get asked about the synod. And number 3 was, how can we be a synodal church without greater roles for women? So I think that that's an unavoidable topic, even though some people think it is a topic that is not on the table. I'm eager to hear what's going on in the continental process right now is all the continents are supposed to say, do you hear your voice in this document? And so I'm eager to hear, and I think the continents will say what that document says about empowering women and that baptismal dignity and the role of a listening church cannot go forward without rethinking the role of women in the church. So I think that everyone in Frascati that wrote this document recognizes that is an important part of the conversion that we're seeking. But what that looks like, the what of that, I don't know. The how of that, absolutely.
Absolutely. Grant, do you have any final words you want to add? Sorry, we couldn't get to everybody's questions tonight, y'all, but I'm sure, you can email a few of us and maybe we can reply in that way. But Grant, any other final thoughts on that question or other questions?
I can't wait to see what comes out of the process. Certainly, I want to see more women roles in the church. I'm not. I'm sold on that already. Like I'm ready for that, and I think we need it. Now, how that makes its way through the process. I'll listen and I'm very curious about it. But in terms of the night, I just want to thank you for the opportunity. This has been great. Dr. Colberg, I just feel blessed to have listened to your, I know you said maybe not a lecture, but your talk tonight, and certainly has been thought provoking for me. And I'm going to go off and, learn a little bit more, read a little bit more, and I'll probably shoot you some emails with some questions. But that's about it. I'm happy to be a part of it. Thank you.
The feeling's mutual.
Well, I am so deeply grateful on behalf of LIM and Loyola New Orleans. I'm deeply grateful for your time, your expertise, and your wisdom, and you're so grateful for your willingness to share with us this evening. I think this was an excellent first session of our series as well. I think you just grounded us all in the deep, deep work that is synodality, and Grant, how it comes alive in community organizing and social justice work. I mean, it's kind of like one and the same, this way of listening and discerning. I was so grateful for your insights on that. And I think it's tremendous. And it's work that's done in the public world. It's work that's done in social justice ministries, and it's the work that the church is called to do. So our next series, lecture in the series, I just put it in the chat there with another link, but I think if you all signed up to get into this, you signed up for the other one. So it is March 16th, same time, same bat channel. at 7 p.m. Central Time with Dr. Susan Bigelow Reynolds. She's going to be speaking on the role of women in the church, followed by LIM alum again, Ms. Kayla August. She was studying at Boston College actually for her doctorate, and she's going to offer a response based on her talk and her research and her context in ministry. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of share just really briefly here. I think it's easier if you can kind of all see what I'm talking about. I want to give you all just a little heads up on, oh gosh, I have to find the right page, hang on, about what's coming up next. So here is our lecture series, and you can go to upcoming events on LIM's website, and I'll drop that in the chat in just a second. And so the next one that we have coming up, the NCCL next week has a free conference. So those that are involved in catechetical leadership, faith formation, things like that, this is totally free and open to the public. I think they might have filled up on the first day, on the 15th. So click the link there and you'll get right to these links. There's part 1 and 2 on the 15th and 16th on what's working in parent and family faith formation. We have a concert for those who are local. We have a concert with Daniel Flaherty, sorry, I always say that wrong. And that's going to be on March 11th in Nunemaker Hall here at Loyola at 7 p.m. We're working on getting the ticketing going, so keep checking back for that, or just email us and we'll get it to you. And we have another series coming up that is part online, part in person. So I believe the lecture with Mary Catherine Hilkert on preaching is going to, the April 14th that you can see right here, the lecture will be virtual and the workshop will be in person. So you can go ahead and learn more to register. You can go to the lecture on the joy of the gospel and baptismal vocation. And then finally, as always, yep, go ahead. Oh, were you going to say something?
I was just saying, Catherine Hilkert is wonderful.
Phenomenal. Yes, I only know her by her writing. So wonderful. I'm excited to meet her. And so, yes, so Barbara's writing down there is March 11th is a fundraiser. Sorry, Barbara, I always get nervous when I speak. It's a fundraiser for LIM. So Daniel Flaherty is, he's bringing his concert here. He lives in Canada now, and he used to be an old staple here in New Orleans. And so he has offered to do his concert as a partial fundraiser for LIM for scholarships for students. And so we would be grateful if you would all, those of us that are local can come and join us. It would be phenomenal to have you. And so, and as always, those that are interested, if you're studying with us, we have a variety of really robust programs. I'm going to drop that link in the chat here too. We have graduate programs in religious education for those that are catechists and involved in faith formation and those that are teachers in Catholic schools. And then also a graduate degree in pastoral studies, which is grounded in practical theological reflection with a whole variety of focus areas, religion and ecology, youth and young adult ministry, and so many more, marketplace ministry, and so many more. So, and we also have continuing ed opportunities, and we have a fully online bachelor's degree in ministry and theology for those that are working towards their undergraduate, fully online through LIM. So if you're curious about our programs, absolutely get in touch with us. Just email me. I'd be happy to respond to y'all. And thank you again, Dr. Colberg, and thank you again, soon to be Dr. Tregre, for joining us this evening. I am just blessed. So I think we're also blessed by your words and your insights. And I know that the topic and the doing the work of synodality is deep in our hearts at LIM. So thank you so very much.